Here we are again talking about more of the North's rail woes. And this is always worth very much bearing repeating. We are crying out for some proper infrastructure development here in the North. We are desperately in need of it. Not only do we need that northern leg of the HS2, the little side one that's been, well, still at the moment being cancelled, but also we need the Northern Powerhouse Rail, which was going to go rather than a north to south development, was going to be an east to west, which, if you know anything about the UK rail system, there's not a lot of east to west connections. It tends to be very, very much north to south. And I've said it only just a couple of weeks ago now. If you want to experience true chaos or want to watch chaos in action, take a trip to either Leeds railway station or Sheffield railway station and sit a while and watch as the cancellations roll in and the look on people's faces as they close their eyes and pray that it's not their train being cancelled. In fact, take a trip to any northern railway stations, or even, dare I say, take a trip this weekend on the rails in the north, just to see true chaos in work. you know, but once again, we have had promises, really going all the way back to David Cameron and George Osborne, promising the Northern Powerhouse, and that they were going to sort of seriously invest in the north. And I've said before, if they had actually followed through with their plans for the Northern Powerhouse and committed to it and spent the money, it would have been a actual good policy proposal from the Conservatives. But the thing is, they didn't follow through on it. They did not commit to those spending levels. They did not do what they said they would do. And for years, going back since then, on Boris Johnson from his promises of levelling up, to Rishi Sunak claiming that he's going to level up, to even Liz Truss saying, "Oh yes, don't worry, I'll level up the country." you know. But once again, people of the North, we get promised stuff and it isn't delivered. And one of the things that Labour certainly needs to learn when it gets into power, because it's very looking like that's going to be the way, that when it makes these promises for infrastructure, that it has to deliver on them, because that will certainly make a lot of people in the North very happy if we all of a sudden have an actual functioning rail system that's fit for the 21st century. So onwards we go today to the Yorkshire Bylines. But before we do that, please do remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below there are links to my Patreon page and a one-off link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can, well, buy me coffee. And as always, thank you very much to all those people who do help and support the channel that way. There is, of course, the YouTube thank you button down below as well, and the Pony Club as well that you can also use to support the channel. So here we are today with the Yorkshire Bylines, covering their disastrous news for Bradford yet again. Promises about rail and infrastructure not materializing yet again. And like I say, don't think that these are going to get filled under Rishi Sunak either. He was very, very much responsible for slashing a lot of the budget that the Levelling Up paper was supposedly promising its first two chapters. And then when you got to the actual money part, as everyone said, that's where Rishi Sunak got in and started slashing money left, right, and center. When we read that, was fascinating. A fascinating read to say just how bad the UK infrastructure and industry really was. But anyway, back into this. So anyway, as we said, this comes to the Yorkshire Bylines with the title of "Promises of Northern Powerhouse Aren't Delivered for Bradford." For the disinterested observer, it must be fascinating to watch the lurches in policy that have taken place in Britain, as one faction of the Conservative Party or another has seized control of the large majority, and they were granted to it by the first place in the first past the post electoral system. Each new minister who took office seems to have delighted in tweaking the tail of the previous one by reversing of policy on their own pet projects. This has produced a chaotic schizophrenia of policies and has left anyone struggling to actually run a public service confused and demoralized. What is the point of even trying to implement a policy if you are not even sure that they will still be in place after the next minister resigns? People of Britain are, of course, not disinterested observers. We are directly affected by the impact of a wild swings between conflicting plans. And there is a very particular evidence of this in Bradford. For more than a century, Bradford's development has been held back by having the worst rail connections of any major city in Britain. Over 500,000 people live in Bradford, and there is no direct rail link to London, and two sad stations that you can't get a train between. The first rare services are often claimed to be direct, that make a huge loop around Leeds that adds at least half an hour to the journey. The services to nearby Manchester trundle along on very slow, slow, rickety line across the Pennines. It's not only 29 miles between the two cities that creates the huge potential for employment opportunities, it makes an hour to get there by train, which doesn't. When levelling up became a huge important slogan for the Conservatives, at first they only planned the benefits for the Bradford rail passengers was that they had had the opportunity to watch from the sidelines as the hugely expensive HS2 project sucked up all the available money into improving the speed of an already rapid service between Leeds and London. But again, as we've talked about before, it's not about speed, it's about freeing up capacity, which again really needs to get the point across. So I sort of disagree with that statement. It wasn't about speed. It wasn't just about improving speed, it was about improving capacity. So then back to it, George Osborne started talking about creating a northern powerhouse and became keen on creating the fast, reliable service from Liverpool to Hull via Bradford. Suddenly, there was a possibility that the people of Bradford and the entire North would get a serious transformation investment project. Instead of having to travel to London to get access to vibrant job opportunities, people could have stayed local and accessed a wide variety of opportunities. Employers could have forged ahead, knowing that they would have access to a massive talent pool that always comes out of northern schools, colleges, and universities, but not always stayed local. The people of Bradford were promised rapid links to Leeds and Manchester and a genuine hope of economic revival. Unfortunately, Osborne proved better at talking about this idea than actually financing it, which is very often the case for every one of these policies. It became the idea to make little progress. And then the 2019 election campaign came along, and Boris Johnson needed to promise something that played well in the North. And the scheme became a prominent part of the campaign and helped Johnson's version of the Conservatives to win a significant number of seats in the deprived northern areas, and the project was on. And we all know the value of a Johnson promise. And after the election, he changed his mind. In June of 2021, he decided that he didn't really mean it and that Bradford could cope with its existing stations and a bit of upgrades on existing lines. The project was off. And of course, that led to the great rail betrayal, if you sort of remember when we did that back then. And of course, that was before Liz Truss then came along. She announced with great confidence that she was reversing this policy and that Bradford would indeed get its new hands on a brand new station and a full line between Liverpool and Hull would be built. This was one of the very rare beacons of light in very dark days of the incompetence and the domination of her Conservative government. Even then, it dominated all other versions. The project was firmly back on again. There was just one teeny weeny problem. She hadn't bothered to work out how she was going to pay for this or any of her other projects. And within days, she had crashed the economy, driven up interest rates, and exposed millions to higher mortgages and rent costs. Rishi Sunak then came in, a man who represents a Yorkshire seat, so we might be expected to at least favour a local practical project designed to level up the north. Instead, his new government immediately proceeded to scrap it, and the Northern Powerhouse project was off again. That is where things currently sit. The new minister apparently thinks that he has cancelled a new Bradford station is no big deal and that there is little point in blasting new tunnels through the Pennines. The good people of Bradford have every right to disagree. Councillor Matt Edwards, who represents Tong, I think that's how you say it, is the Green Party national spokesperson on transport, expressly outraged clearly. So there's his tweet. So, how many promises are the Tories going to break to the residents of Bradford? Northern House Rails is an important piece of economic future for the city. Rail is an important part of preparing Bradford for a low carbon future. Yeah. And of course, the Bradford City Council leader put it this way: we've got a plan for a clean growth in Bradford that includes a new station on an electrified line which connects us better to the rest of the north of England. I fail to see why any rational government interested in promoting growth would not be interested in working with Bradford to deliver this plan, which could provide over 27,000 jobs and £3 billion annual uplift to the economy. And that's just how much having good transport can affect a city. An extra 27,000 jobs and 3 billion annual uplift to the local economy. Honestly, when you really start to think about this, it just goes to show you how seriously the Tories have not taken levelling up. And as we've always said this, you look at Germany, between East and West Germany, and I've said it before. There's probably a lot of like East Germans who can watch this and say, "Oh, our government hasn't done enough, or maybe taken stuff seriously." But you look at the amount of money that the German government's put in to leveling up the East for 2 to 3 decades now. That is leveling up taken seriously. Your government has actually generally given leveling up a serious good go. Our government likes to just talk about it, but then not actually fulfill its promises. And now, of course, austerity is back on the menu. So all these promises to leveling up are not going to materialize. So, despite the huge need for major economic development in Bradford, the chances of another reversal of policy are low. This side of a general election, the current incarnation of the Conservative Party is busy preaching the need for caution and responsibility. Yet they voted for the reckless, irresponsible policies that have caused the problems in the first place. After the free market banking collapse in 2008, a huge program of austerity was inflicted on people who played no part in causing the clash, whilst those who did got away with it with keeping their bonus money. Now the nation is facing yet another vicious program of austerity being inflicted on people who didn't cause the economic crash by people who did. There is only one crumb of comfort in all this. Anyone in Bradford who voted for the Conservatives because they believed in levelling up is extremely unlikely to do so again. If there is any justice, then we will see the back of this party that has lurched between these policies for a very long time to come. And that is generally the hope, I think. You know, a big part of this is really the fact that the Conservatives have failed for at least more than a decade now to even fulfill their promises. We've seen them actually come in, actually have MPs, because prior to this, especially in the North, a lot of the Conservatives would say, "Oh, if only we were in power in the North, if only you had a Northern MP, if only you had a Conservative MP, things would be better." Well, lots of places have had Conservative MPs since 2019. Things haven't exactly got better. Just take Bradford. The fact that this massive infrastructure project could provide so much to the city, and not just Bradford, but to towns and cities all across the north, if they generally seriously wanted to do this. And rail is the best way to prepare for a low carbon future. Rail travel is how you do it. And yet, no, this isn't what is being prepared because, of course, as always, the Tories only really care about London being the economic driver, and well, the rest of the country can go to pot as far as they're concerned. And bear in mind, this isn't just happening in the north now; it's happening in the Midlands. It's happening even down south as well. People in these sort of the towns and cities there, they're seeing now the effects of what we in the north have been talking about for the past decade, and it's now starting to catch up down south. So there really is hope that we can sort of really change direction. And if we do, as we looked at this week in the live stream, you've got a Labour majority of over like 450 something. Starmer, if he's brave enough, can cause huge economic changes to the country, but he has to be brave enough to be able to pursue them. And we have to, being on the left and support Labour, to push them in that direction. And we can do that. We can do that, and we must do that because we deserve better. So, as always, thank you very much for watching. And of course, we'll see you all next time.